Dr. Richard Hayes, a highly respected but arrogant surgeon, humiliates a black nurse, Aisha Patel, in front of a patient, dismissing her skills and professionalism. Unbeknownst to him, the patient is Dr. Michael Carter, a renowned medical director evaluating the hospital staff for a major promotion. Dr. Hayes' actions set off a chain of events that challenge his beliefs, expose hidden biases, and ultimately lead to his downfall, or redemption. Dr. Richard Hayes stormed into the patient's room, his frustration palpable. "Nurse Patel, if you can't follow simple instructions, maybe you should reconsider your career." Aisha stiffened, her dark eyes flashing with restrained emotion. "Dr. Hayes, I was following standard protocol." He scoffed. "Protocol? I asked for an immediate dosage, not your opinion." In the hospital bed, Dr. Michael Carter observed in silence, his keen eyes missing nothing. After the humiliating encounter, Aisha found solace in her colleagues. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter made a note of Hayes' behavior. Later that day, an announcement stunned the hospital. Dr. Carter was there to assess staff conduct for a leadership position. When Dr. Hayes learned who the patient truly was, his confidence wavered. He attempted to apologize, but his words rang hollow. Aisha, professional as ever, refused to let the moment define her. But others had taken notice, and complaints against Hayes surfaced. Facing scrutiny, Dr. Hayes had two choices: continue his downward spiral or change. Through a series of eye-opening experiences, including working closely with Aisha on critical cases, he began to confront his biases. As the hospital decided Hayes' fate, Aisha found herself in a position of unexpected power. Would she advocate for his dismissal, or would she recognize his efforts to change? The incident reshaped lives. Aisha rose in her career, earning well-deserved respect. Dr. Hayes, humbled, chose to be better, proving that even the proudest can change when faced with the truth. Dr. Carter's final report arrived, a document that would determine Hayes' professional future. The hospital board deliberated over its contents, the tension palpable. The words within spoke of both past failures and potential for growth. Hayes sat outside the boardroom, his hands clasped together, contemplating the possibility of losing everything he had built. Meanwhile, Aisha continued to thrive, becoming a mentor to younger nurses and advocating for systemic changes within the hospital. Her resilience and dedication were recognized, and she was offered a leadership role. Despite the hurt she had endured, she remained professional, understanding that true change required patience and persistence. In the days that followed, Dr. Hayes made a decision that surprised many. He requested to shadow Aisha on her rounds, learning firsthand the value of teamwork and mutual respect. The process was not easy, but step by step, he worked to rebuild his reputation, not through words, but through actions. A year later, the hospital had transformed, with greater emphasis on diversity and respect among staff. Aisha and Hayes, once adversaries, now found themselves working towards a common goal: to provide the best care for their patients. The past was not forgotten, but it became the foundation for a better future. Aisha, too, found herself growing. Leadership brought new challenges, but she faced them with the same resilience that had carried her through adversity. She was no longer just a nurse, she was a beacon of change, proving that strength and kindness could coexist. One afternoon, Dr. Carter invited both Hayes and Aisha to his office. He leaned back in his chair, a knowing smile on his face. "I have an offer for you both," he said. "The hospital board has decided to create a new initiative for training future medical leaders. We want both of you to co-lead it." Hayes and Aisha exchanged a glance. A year ago, such a proposal would have been unthinkable. Now, it felt like the next step in their shared journey. "I'm in," Aisha said. Hayes nodded. "Me too." Dr. Carter grinned. "Good. Let's change the future of medicine, together." The program launched with overwhelming success. Aspiring doctors and nurses from diverse backgrounds flocked to their mentorship. Aisha's leadership inspired young nurses to step into positions of influence, while Hayes, humbled by his past, became an advocate for medical ethics and inclusion. Their combined efforts brought about real change, not just within the hospital but across the entire medical community. Years later, a young nurse approached Aisha and Hayes at a conference. "I joined this profession because of you two," she said with admiration. "Your story showed me that change is possible." Aisha smiled. Hayes chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, I had to learn the hard way," he admitted. "But if we can inspire others to be better, then it was worth it." As they stood together, looking out at a new generation of medical professionals, they knew their journey was far from over. Change was not a destination, it was an ongoing process. And they were ready to keep pushing forward, one step at a time. Several years passed since the program's launch, and the hospital had become a model for diversity, equity, and inclusion within the medical community. Aisha and Hayes had continued to lead the training program, refining it with each new cohort of medical professionals. Their relationship, once strained by the shadows of past grievances, had blossomed into a partnership founded on mutual respect and a shared mission. But as the world changed, so did the challenges. One day, Aisha found herself facing a difficult decision. The hospital had been struggling with a rise in burnout rates among healthcare workers, and the board had tasked her and Hayes with spearheading an initiative to address the issue. But the pressure was immense. As much as she had grown into her leadership role, Aisha still felt the weight of systemic problems that had yet to be fully addressed. Hayes noticed her growing concerns during their weekly strategy meetings. He had come to understand the nuances of burnout and stress, having been through his own transformation. He was now more attuned to the mental and emotional toll the profession could take on those who dedicated their lives to healing others. "You've been quieter than usual," he said one afternoon after a particularly intense meeting. "What's on your mind?" Aisha paused, staring at the piles of reports and data before her. "It's just, there's so much more to be done. We've made progress, but I'm starting to wonder if it's enough. Are we really doing enough to support our teams? Or are we just managing the symptoms and not the root cause?" Hayes could hear the frustration in her voice. He leaned back in his chair, the years of arrogance long behind him. He knew Aisha's mind was always focused on the bigger picture, never settling for easy solutions. "We're tackling it the best we can. But maybe it's time to take a step back and ask ourselves, what do we really want to change? Is it just the working hours or is it the culture itself? Because if we're going to make a real impact, it has to be deeper than just policies." Aisha sighed, rubbing her temples. "You're right. The culture, the support systems, it's all interconnected. But it's hard to make those kinds of changes when you're facing pushback from the very people who benefit from the old system." Hayes nodded, understanding. "We can't fix it overnight. But we've done impossible things before, Aisha. Maybe it's time to aim even higher." Aisha smiled weakly. "Maybe you're right. But I can't do this alone." Hayes reached over, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And you don't have to. We've got a team. And we've got each other." As the days turned into weeks, Aisha and Hayes worked tirelessly to craft a comprehensive approach to addressing burnout. They consulted with doctors, nurses, and support staff, gathering insights from every corner of the hospital. They reviewed policies, developed mental health resources, and created a culture of support and open dialogue. The road to implementation was rocky, with resistance from some departments that felt threatened by the changes. But Aisha's calm determination and Hayes' humility won over even the most skeptical colleagues. Together, they fostered a space where vulnerability was no longer seen as a weakness but as a strength, a necessary step toward healing. Their efforts culminated in a hospital-wide wellness day, a groundbreaking initiative that included workshops on stress management, mindfulness, and community-building exercises. It was an unprecedented success, drawing the attention of other hospitals and healthcare organizations across the country. The story of the Wellness Day spread, and Aisha and Hayes were invited to speak at national conferences, sharing their approach to tackling burnout and cultivating a healthier work environment. The medical community took note, and the changes they had worked so hard to implement became a beacon for others to follow. One afternoon, Dr. Carter called Aisha and Hayes into his office. He had a proud smile on his face. "I've been hearing some incredible things about your wellness program," he said, leaning forward. "You've not only changed your own hospital, but you've started a ripple effect across the industry. The board is impressed." Aisha and Hayes exchanged a glance, both of them quietly humbled by the progress they had made. But they knew this was just one chapter in a much larger journey. "I think we've got a long way to go," Aisha said, her tone thoughtful. "There's still so much work to be done." Hayes nodded. "But we're on the right path. And I think, together, we can lead the way." Dr. Carter smiled. "I couldn't agree more. I have a feeling this is just the beginning of something truly transformative." As they left his office, Aisha and Hayes stood in the hallway for a moment, reflecting on how far they had come. They had faced their own demons, had struggled with their limitations, and had worked together to build something meaningful. They had both learned, and were still learning, that true leadership wasn't about titles or accolades, it was about making a difference, no matter how small. And so, they pressed on, knowing that their journey, like medicine itself, was a constant evolution. Every day brought new challenges, new opportunities, and, most importantly, new chances to change lives. Together, they were ready for whatever came next.